My name is Jack Thompson, and this is the story of how my marriage fell apart. I suppose it started a few years ago, though I didn't realize it at the time. It's amazing how blind love can make you. Or maybe it's not blindness so much as a willingness to ignore the things you don't want to see. I met Emily when we were both in college at the University of Wisconsin. I was studying business, and she was an art major. I remember the first time I saw her, she was sitting on the lawn outside the student union, sketching something in her notebook. She had this intense look on her face, totally absorbed in what she was doing. She was beautiful in that natural, effortless way. Long brown hair, green eyes, a kind smile. I was smitten right away. We started dating soon after, and everything just clicked. She was passionate about art and full of life, and I loved her creativity and spontaneity. We got married right after graduation and moved to Chicago, where I landed a job at a marketing firm. It wasn't my dream job, but it paid well, and I figured it was a good starting point. Emily found work as a graphic designer at a small studio downtown. Our first few years together were great. We rented a cozy apartment in Lincoln Park, spent weekends exploring the city, and took road trips whenever we could. But as the years went by, things started to change. I guess you could say we drifted apart, though I didn't realize it at the time. I was busy climbing the corporate ladder, and Emily was focused on her art. She started getting recognition for her work and even had a few gallery shows. I was proud of her, but I also started to feel like we were living separate lives. About 5 years into our marriage, I got a big promotion. I was now the head of my department, which meant more money, but also more hours at the office. I was often working late, and when I did get home, I was exhausted. Emily, on the other hand, seemed to be thriving. She had joined an artist collective and was spending a lot of time at their studio space. She was meeting new people, making new friends. I was happy for her, but I also felt a pang of jealousy. She seemed so fulfilled, while I was just going through the motions. One evening, I came home to find Emily sitting on the couch, staring at her phone. She looked up when I walked in, and I could tell something was off. She seemed distant, distracted. "Hey, how was your day?" I asked, dropping my briefcase by the door. "It was fine," she replied, but there was an edge to her voice that made me uneasy. "Are you sure? You seem, I don't know, upset or something." She sighed and put her phone down. "I'm just tired, Jack. It's been a long day." I nodded, not wanting to press the issue. I figured she'd tell me what was bothering her when she was ready. But days turned into weeks, and she didn't say anything. She just grew more and more distant. One night, a few months later, we were having dinner at one of our favorite restaurants, a little Italian place down the street. It was supposed to be a celebration. We were marking our 7th anniversary, but the atmosphere was anything but festive. Emily was picking at her food, barely touching her wine. I tried to make conversation, but she was giving me one-word answers, her mind clearly elsewhere. "Emily, what's going on?" I finally asked, unable to hide my frustration. "You've been acting strange for weeks. If something's bothering you, just tell me." She looked up at me, her eyes filled with tears. "Jack, I don't know how to say this." My heart sank. I had a feeling I knew what was coming, but I didn't want to believe it. "I've met someone," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The room seemed to spin around me, and I felt like I was going to be sick. "What do you mean you've met someone?" She took a deep breath. "His name is David. He's part of the artist collective. We've been spending a lot of time together, and I think I have feelings for him." Dear viewers, more than 90% watch my content without subscribing. If you still have not subscribed, then I ask you to do so. For me, this is the best motivation to continue. I stared at her, unable to process what she was saying. Are you having an affair?" She shook her head quickly. "No, it's not like that. We haven't done anything. But I can't deny that there's something there. And I think I need some space to figure things out." "Space?" I repeated, feeling like I was in some sort of nightmare. "Emily, we're married. You don't just take space from your spouse." "I know," she said, tears streaming down her face now. "I know this is awful, and I'm so sorry, but I need to be honest with you. I need to figure out what I want." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to yell at her, to demand that she end things with this David guy and focus on our marriage. But another part of me was just numb, unable to process the fact that my wife was in love with someone else. We left the restaurant in silence. The ride home was the longest 20 minutes of my life. When we got back to our apartment, Emily went straight to the bedroom and closed the door. I stood in the living room, staring at the door, feeling completely and utterly lost. Over the next few days, we barely spoke. I threw myself into my work, staying at the office later and later to avoid coming home. When I did see Emily, she was distant, polite but cold. It was like living with a stranger. One evening, about a week after our disastrous anniversary dinner, Emily came to me with a suitcase in her hand. "I'm going to stay with a friend for a while," she said. "I need some time to think." I wanted to argue, to beg her to stay, but I could see in her eyes that she had already made up her mind. "Okay," I said quietly. "Take all the time you need." And with that, she was gone. The next few weeks were a blur. I went to work, came home to an empty apartment, and tried to make sense of what had happened. I reached out to a few friends, but I couldn't bring myself to tell them the truth. I didn't want to admit that my marriage was falling apart. It wasn't until a month later that Emily called me. "Can we meet?" she asked. "I think we need to talk." We met at a coffee shop downtown, a neutral place where we could have some privacy. Emily looked different, tired, but also somehow more alive. She had a light in her eyes that I hadn't seen in a long time. "Jack," she began, "I've been doing a lot of thinking, and I've realized that I don't think I can come back. I don't think our marriage can be saved." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I want a divorce." The word hung in the air between us, heavy and final. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Are you sure? Can't we at least try counseling or something?" She shook her head. "I've thought about it, and I don't think it would help. I've fallen out of love with you, Jack, and I don't think I can get those feelings back." I wanted to argue, to tell her that we could make it work if we just tried harder. But deep down, I knew she was right. Our marriage had been falling apart for a long time, and there was no way to fix it. "Okay," I said finally, my voice breaking. "If that's what you want." We talked for a while longer, discussing the logistics of the divorce. Who would move out, how we would split our assets. It was all very civil, very adult. But inside, I was falling apart. When we left the coffee shop, I felt like I was in a daze. I couldn't believe that my marriage was over, that the woman I had loved for so long was now a stranger to me. Over the next few months, I went through the motions of getting divorced. We sold our apartment, divided up our belongings, and went our separate ways. I moved into a small condo on the other side of town, trying to start over. But everywhere I looked, I saw reminders of Emily, of the life we had built together. I threw myself into my work, hoping that the distraction would help numb the pain. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't escape the fact that my marriage had ended in betrayal. Emily had fallen in love with someone else, and there was nothing I could do to change that. As time went on, I began to rebuild my life. I made new friends, picked up old hobbies, and tried to move on. But the scars from my failed marriage remained, a constant reminder of what I had lost. And so, here I am, telling my story. Not because I want sympathy or pity, but because I need to get it out. I need to make sense of what happened, to come to terms with the fact that sometimes love just isn't enough. Absolutely. I'll ensure each part remains unique and engaging. Dear viewers, I ask you to subscribe to the channel under this video. I will be very grateful to you. Building upon Jack's journey without repetition. Let's continue with the second part of the story, focusing on Jack's efforts to rebuild his life post-divorce, his new job, and the challenges he faces. Starting over wasn't easy. In the weeks following the divorce, I found myself sinking into a routine of work and solitude. My new condo, a modest place in Wicker Park, was quiet. Too quiet. The silence was deafening, a stark contrast to the life I once shared with Emily. I knew I had to find a way to fill the void. One day, my colleague Brian suggested grabbing a drink after work. I wasn't particularly close to Brian, but I needed the distraction. We ended up at a bustling bar a few blocks from the office. As we sipped our beers, Brian asked how I was doing. I gave the usual polite response, but he saw right through me. "Come on, Jack," he said, leaning in. "I know things have been rough. You need to get out more, meet new people. You're too young to be living like a hermit." I nodded, appreciating his concern. "Yeah, you're right. It's just hard, you know?" He clapped me on the back. "I hear you, man. But you've got to start somewhere. There's this hiking group I'm part of. Great bunch of people. You should come along this weekend." Hiking wasn't exactly my idea of fun, but I agreed. Anything to break the monotony. That Saturday, I found myself at a trailhead in the Palace Forest Preserve, a vast expanse of woods and lakes just outside the city. The group was a mix of ages and backgrounds, all united by their love of the outdoors. Brian introduced me to a few people, and before long, we set off into the forest. The hike was challenging, but the physical exertion felt good. It was a relief to focus on something other than my own thoughts. As we walked, I struck up a conversation with a woman named Karen. She was in her mid-30s, a nurse who loved hiking and photography. We talked about our favorite trails, the best places to catch a sunset, and I found myself genuinely enjoying her company. By the end of the hike, I felt a sense of accomplishment, not just for completing the trail, but for taking a step toward reclaiming my life. Brian's advice had been sound. I needed to keep pushing myself, to keep finding new ways to connect with people. In the following weeks, I joined the hiking group regularly. It became a part of my routine, something to look forward to. I also started attending networking events and social gatherings more often. At one of these events, I met a guy named Sam who worked in real estate. We hit it off and soon became fast friends. Sam was outgoing and fun, the complete opposite of my current introverted state, and he pushed me to try new things. One evening, Sam convinced me to join him at a trivia night at a local pub. I was hesitant at first, but he insisted it would be fun. The pub was packed with teams ready to compete. We joined a group that included a couple of Sam's friends, and I quickly found myself immersed in the game. It was a blast, a reminder that life could still be enjoyable. During one of these trivia nights, I noticed a woman sitting at the bar, nursing a drink and watching the game. She had an air of quiet confidence about her, and I couldn't help but be intrigued. Sam, ever the wingman, noticed my interest and encouraged me to go talk to her. I took a deep breath and approached her. "Hey, mind if I sit here?" She looked up, her eyes meeting mine. "Sure, go ahead." I introduced myself and she smiled. "I'm Rachel." We started chatting, and I learned that Rachel was a freelance writer, originally from New York. She had moved to Chicago a few years ago and loved the city's vibrant culture. Our conversation flowed easily, and I found myself captivated by her stories and her wit. We exchanged numbers, and over the next few weeks, we began to see each other regularly. Rachel was unlike anyone I had ever met. She was intelligent, independent, and had a way of looking at the world that was refreshing. For the first time since my divorce, I felt a spark of hope. Meanwhile, work was becoming increasingly demanding. My promotion had come with a significant increase in responsibilities, and the pressure was mounting. One evening, my boss called me into his office. "Jack, we've got a new project coming up, and I want you to lead it," he said, sliding a thick folder across the desk. I opened the folder and skimmed through the details. It was a major marketing campaign for a national retailer, a high-stakes project that could make or break my career. I felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. This was the opportunity I had been waiting for, but it also meant long hours and intense scrutiny. "I'm on it," I said, trying to sound confident. Over the next few months, my life became a blur of meetings, deadlines, and late nights at the office. The project consumed me, leaving little time for anything else. Rachel was supportive, but I could sense her frustration. We spent less and less time together, and I could see the strain it was putting on our relationship. One Friday night, after a particularly grueling week, I met Rachel for dinner. She looked beautiful, but there was a sadness in her eyes. "Jack, we need to talk," she said as soon as we sat down. My heart sank. Those words rarely preceded anything good. "I know how important this project is to you," she began, "and I've tried to be understanding, but I feel like I'm competing with your job for your attention, and right now, I'm losing." I reached across the table and took her hand. "Rachel, I'm sorry. I know I've been distant, but this project is almost done. Things will get better soon, I promise." She squeezed my hand, but I could see the doubt in her eyes. I hope so, Jack. I really do. The following weeks were a balancing act. I poured everything into the project, determined to see it through to success, while also trying to make time for Rachel. It wasn't easy, and there were moments when I felt like I was failing on both fronts. Finally, the day of the big presentation arrived. I stood in front of a room full of executives, my heart pounding. As I walked them through our strategy, I could see nods of approval, and by the end, the room erupted in applause. The campaign was a success. Relieved and exhausted, I called Rachel to share the good news. She was happy for me, but there was a distance in her voice that I couldn't ignore. "Can we celebrate tomorrow?" she asked. "I have plans tonight." "Of course," I said, though I felt a pang of disappointment. The next day, we met for brunch. Rachel seemed distracted, and I could tell something was on her mind. "Jack, I've been doing a lot of thinking," she said finally, "and I've realized that I need more from a relationship than what we have right now." I felt a lump in my throat. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I care about you, but I don't think this is working for me. I need someone who can be there for me, and right now, you're not that person." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. "Rachel, please, just give me a chance. Things will get better, I promise." She shook her head sadly. "I'm sorry, Jack. I just can't keep doing this." And with that, she walked away, leaving me sitting there, feeling more alone than ever. In the weeks that followed, I threw myself even deeper into my work. It was the only thing that seemed to make sense anymore. But no matter how successful I was, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. One evening, as I sat in my empty condo, I decided I needed a change. I had spent too long dwelling on my past, too long letting my work define me. It was time to take control of my life. I started by reconnecting with old friends, people I had lost touch with over the years. I reached out to my college buddy Tom, who now lived in Denver. We had been close in school, but life had pulled us in different directions. Tom was thrilled to hear from me. "Jack, it's been too long. You should come out to Denver for a visit. The mountains are amazing this time of year." I took him up on his offer, booking a flight for the following weekend. The trip was exactly what I needed, a chance to get away from the grind, to clear my head, and to reconnect with an old friend. Denver was beautiful. Tom took me hiking in the Rockies, and we spent our evenings catching up over beers at local breweries. It felt good to be out of the city, to breathe fresh air and see new sights. But more than that, it felt good to be with someone who knew me, who understood what I was going through. One afternoon, as we sat on a mountaintop, looking out over the vast expanse of forest and sky, Tom turned to me. "Jack, you need to find something that makes you happy. Work is important, but it's not everything. You need balance." His words resonated with me. I realized I had been so focused on my career that I had forgotten how to enjoy life. It was time to make a change. When I returned to Chicago, I made a list of things I wanted to do, things that had nothing to do with work. I signed up for a cooking class, something I had always wanted to try. I started going to the gym regularly, taking care of my physical health. And I joined a local book club, eager to meet new people and engage in stimulating conversations. Slowly but surely, I began to find a new rhythm. I was still dedicated to my job, but I made sure to carve out time for the things that brought me joy. I reconnected with my hiking group, exploring new trails and deepening my friendships with people who shared my love of the outdoors. One Saturday, during a particularly challenging hike, I found myself walking alongside Karen. We had become good friends over the months, but I had always kept my distance emotionally, wary of getting hurt again. As we climbed a steep hill, Karen turned to me. "Jack, I've been meaning to ask you something." "What's that?" I replied, slightly out of breath. "Why do you always hold back? You're a great guy, but it feels like you're afraid to let people in." Her question caught me off guard. I had spent so long building walls around my heart that I hadn't even realized I was doing it. "I guess I'm just scared," I admitted. "I've been hurt before, and it's hard to trust again." Karen nodded, her expression understanding. "I get that, but you can't let fear hold you back forever. Sometimes, you just have to take a leap of faith." Her words stayed with me long after the hike was over. I knew she was right. I had been so focused on protecting myself that I had forgotten how to truly live. That evening, I called Karen and asked her out to dinner. It wasn't a date, not officially, but it felt like the beginning of something new. We had a great time, talking and laughing like old friends. There was an ease between us that I hadn't felt in a long time. As the night went on, I realized that I was ready to take that leap of faith, to open my heart again. Over the next few months, Karen and I grew closer. She was patient and kind, never pushing me too hard, but always encouraging me to be my best self. With her support, I found the strength to let go of my past and embrace the future. One evening, as we sat on my balcony, watching the sunset, Karen turned to me. "Jack, do you ever think about what you want for the future?" I nodded, taking her hand in mine. "I do, and I know that I want you to be a part of it." She smiled, her eyes shining with happiness. "I want that too, Jack." In that moment, I knew that I had finally found my way forward. It hadn't been easy, and there were still challenges ahead, but I was ready to face them with Karen by my side. My journey had been long and difficult, filled with heartbreak and self-discovery. But in the end, I had found a new sense of purpose, a new sense of hope, and I knew that whatever the future held, I was ready to embrace it, one step at a time.